Hey everyone, Darth John from Nintendo Live here, and today we're reviewing Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic for Nintendo Switch. But these are not my words and opinions, as this review is written by Mitch Vogel for NintendoLive.com. But without further ado, let's get back to the past, to play the fun games that were pretty good.
Hurry up, we don't have much time. Did you fall out of your bunk and hit your head? The Endar Spire is the ship we're stationed on. This ship.
The Star Wars universe has always been far richer and more interesting than just the small slice shown off in the massively popular films. Although most of this expanded lore has since been decanonized shortly after Disney acquiring the IP. But one of the most notable parts of this legacy content was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. This originally came out on Xbox and PC way back in 2003, and soon it's getting a full remake on PS5 and Series X. KOTOR takes place in the mostly unexplored distant past of the Star Wars timeline, and this BioWare RPG was quite an impressive achievement back in the day, and still remains a compelling experience now. Though there are some elements of KOTOR that absolutely show their age, this is still a solid, nostalgia-laden title that we're happy to have available on the go on Nintendo for the very first time. KOTOR takes place approximately 4,000 years before the prequel films, so there are no Skywalkers or confusingly resurrected Emperors to be seen here. The game opens shortly after the Galactic Republic has barely finished a war against the Mandalorians, and now finds itself being invaded by an armada led by two Jedi-turned-Sith, who spearheaded the initial war effort. Though one of the Sith, Darth Revan, has been killed, but their apprentice, Darth Malak, is still hellbent on completing their mission of eliminating the Republic. In the midst of all this, you play as a simple, nobody character who gets caught up in the struggle and ultimately changes the outcome of the conflict. Although the spectre of this wartime backdrop looms large over everything you do, KOTOR is mostly defined by the smaller, ground-level stories you get drawn into as you slowly pull together your party and chart your course through the stars. For example, the world you first start on, Taris, is defined by the struggle to both track down the whereabouts of an important Jedi and to find a reliable transport to get off-world. Even these smaller objectives frequently get put on the back burner. There are so many steps involved in getting them done. This doesn't detract too much from the overall experience, as all of them improve your understanding of the world or its social systems in some way. The story may sound a bit meandering, and yeah, it can be, but KOTOR does a spectacular job of creating a world that feels adequately lived in. This is a phrase tossed around in a lot of great RPGs, but it feels doubly true here. And a big part of this is credited to the in-depth dialogue system, which ensures that even conversations with one-and-done NPCs have more to them than just one or two lines. Not only does this add a lot more flavour to the communities you find yourself moving through, but all this additional dialogue is critical to finding out what to do next. KOTOR has a quest log to track your objectives, but it certainly doesn't point you where to go. Talking with NPCs guides you the way. Beyond this, there's a rather simplistic morality system at the heart of your interactions. How you respond to events will influence whether you lean more towards the light or dark sides of the Force. How you talk to someone in a bar may affect if you fight them later on. Having that leeway to choose between either being a Boy Scout or a bully makes the narrative feel much more personal, much more replayable too. There are instances where you can't help but wonder, how would this play out the other way? It's far from the most detailed or realistic take on a morality system in a game, yet there are still many instances where the right thing to do feels fittingly grey. There's a fair amount of exploration to be had in the world itself, but this is perhaps where KOTOR feels the most like a 20-year-old game. Environments are laid out in a somewhat maze-like fashion, littered with treasures, enemies, and NPCs. But whether you're traipsing across the sandy dunes of Tatooine or the woody locales of Kashyyyk, KOTOR ultimately feels like a series of very flat rooms connected to each other. There's not much variety to be seen on a foundational level. Now, one can only expect so much from a game of this era, but just be prepared for level and world designs that are decidedly less interesting than those you might see today. Whenever you find yourself pulled into combat, things appear to play out in a very fast-paced live-action style. In reality, all numbers are being calculated using an old-school D20 stat system, and actions are playing out in a simple, turn-based fashion. For simple encounters, you don't have to do much, pretty much just stand there and take them out. But the challenging ones have a usage of additional combat skills, and later on, force powers. So in practice, the combat from KOTOR doesn't end up being that different to an old-school Final Fantasy game, even though it feels radically different. Once you've gotten enough experience from questing or killing enemies, you're then allowed to level up your characters in a fashion that's a little more hands-on than usual. You can always choose to go ahead and auto-level and let the game choose how to handle it for you, but you're encouraged to manually distribute your stat points yourself. Putting more points into computer, for example, makes things easier to hack, while putting points into demolitions makes things easier to dismantle and recover live mines. You're only given a few points to distribute each time, but on the flip side, one stat boost can make a world of difference. Additionally, you're also given a tree of feats, which can govern things like your proficiency with different weapon types, or fancy new abilities to use in combat. Much like your stats, you must be quite discerning with the points you have here. Things are made all the more stressful by the fact there's no option to respec your character, so it's entirely possible you can ruin your build. So you might even have to start the game all over again, or be faced with a much more difficult quest in certain aspects. In this regard, KOTOR again shows its age. It can be difficult to understand precisely what a given stat will actually do for you, and the in-game information can be frustratingly thin at times. But aside from the expected RPG trappings, KOTOR also features a variety of minigames. These include a simple drag racing challenge, first-person shooting from a turret of your ship, and a blackjack-like card game. None of these are more than just little distractions along your journey, but they do add just the right amount of variety to keep the otherwise rigid gameplay loop from becoming too stale. And one minor annoyance we feel still needs to be mentioned is that it's abundantly clear KOTOR was not designed to be played with a controller. While it may have been originally released on the Xbox alongside PC, everything feels geared to a mouse. There are lots of interactable elements in any given part of the world, and where you would simply point and click on menus or NPCs in the past, here you rather awkwardly cycle through targets by using the shoulder buttons. It's far from deal-breaking, and would argue the novelty of having KOTOR on the go outweighs this drawback, but just be prepared for controls that always feel a little hokey. Although the lighting's been given a nice bump, the frame rate runs higher, and the textures are nicely detailed, you still can't mistake this for a modern game. Everything's a bit simple, the environments, the chunky character models, the stiff animations, it's all par of the course here. And while this was probably quite the looker back in its day, it just doesn't hold up that well anymore. But meanwhile, the soundtrack fares much better. The identity is so close to John Williams' score. As the years have gone on, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic may have lost some of its luster, but the foundations of a well-written and enjoyable RPG haven't aged a day. If you can get past things like awkward controls, middling presentation, and a complete lack of handholding, the 30ish hour campaign offers an engaging romp through the beloved Star Wars universe. We'd give KOTOR on Switch a strong recommendation to any fans of Star Wars or RPGs in general, just with the caveat that you'll get more out of this if you can stomach archaic game design elements. We here at Nintendo Life give Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic a 7 out of 10. I'll give some of my own thoughts in just a moment, but until then, thank you for watching, and of course, go that subscribe button and try and be nice to it, and maybe you'll meet Yoda and have the light side of the Force. And we'll see you next time. Bye everyone! So I think my opinion may stray a bit from Mitch's. I really enjoy the older elements. I feel many modern game elements have regressed, especially in RPGs. I don't like following markers around. When there's a waypoint or a map showing you exactly where to go, your eyes are on that map the entire time rather than taking in the world. I think games are much stronger when it uses environmental storytelling and direction, and that's exactly what KOTOR does. I do agree though that many environments are quite maze-like, and that can make things feel very unorganic. Like you land on a world and it's just this kind of boxy game area. The RPG elements carry this game hard, and in many respects, I'm not sure BioWare has ever really done better than the RPG elements in this game. Everything feels like it has a weight and an importance, and just talking to people feels important. If you're deep into Star Wars, I think you'll get a lot out of this. This game spends a long time on its characters and its world building, and it really excels in that area. And the remaster itself, it doesn't really do much, it just kind of presents the game as it always was, but in a more clean style. And I wish more remasters would do that if anything. Sonic Unleashed and Generations just got 60 FPS patches on Xbox, and I'm more pleased with that than Colors Ultimate. Just giving us the original games, but making them run better. That's all I want from a remaster, and this is exactly that. This is pretty cheap on the eShop too, so I highly recommend it. Easily one of the best Star Wars games ever made.